Hello and welcome to today's video, the next installment in my month of Atramentis reviews here in April 2023. If you're not watching in April 2023, go back and have a look. I've done a few reviews of some lovely Atramentis inks this month. And we'll be continuing to for the rest of the month. This is the third installment, and today we are looking at this ink, which is Thomas Jefferson from the Politics range. It's also there, as you can see. The color is lapis, and we're going to look at it on some different kinds of paper, put it under a couple of tests, and just have a bit of a general chat about it. First up, here is the ink on a coloring card. You can see it's a nice sort of, I suppose it's not quite a royal blue. It's a little bit sort of warmer, or it's got a bit more depth to it than sort of a straight up royal blue, but it's also kind of, it's not a particularly dark blue. It's got some nice vibrancy to it, and you can see there on the coloring card. While I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of sheen, there's like, sort of like a little bit of a blanket of sheen just over, particularly where the ink has gone on a little bit thicker. So this is an interesting and quite nice ink. Let's look at it on some paper. So here we have it on the typical 68 GSM Tolma River paper. I had this in two pens. I've only listed the one because I forgot to write the other one down. TWSBI goes in both the extra fine and the broad, nice sort of standard pens if you're familiar with the TWSBI range. So you can see here on the Tolma River, once again, lovely, rich, warm, sort of darker royal blue or earthier royal blue with a tiny sort of blanket of sheen and some hits of that red sheen, copper red sheen sort of around the edges, which is nice. Let's talk about the 5 points here. So as I've said, these are made in Hardet in Germany. And then the second point is that they're handmade to in careful detail. The parameters of these inks and all the dyes and everything that go into them are very well taken into account, and the fact that they are, fountain pen safe and all of those kinds of things. Yeah, it's a well-considered range of inks. As I said in the beginning, this ink is also known as lapis. Atramentis take inks from their range and they brand them with the in the literature range and the politics range and all those kinds of things. It's a nice way of sort of like injecting some real personality into the lineup. As I said, it's from the politics line, and that includes people like Alexander Hamilton, Mahatma Gandhi, Jesse James, Abraham Lincoln, Elizabeth of Austria, and a huge range sort of political figures. So let's now talk about the performance of this ink. I've said it's not the wettest ink from Atramentis. Atramentis inks have a tendency to be on the wetter side. This one is nice in its wetness. It's not super, super wet, but it has a nice sort of flow on the page. Decent flow, mid-saturation, so, a nice amount of colour down on the page. It's decently concentrated. Nice warmth in the blue with some hints of purple. So we talk about blues being on, sort of that range of colours, all colours sort of being on a range of colours, and sort of sometimes purple sneaks into blue, and sometimes you get like little hits of that with this ink. I said there's some bleed and feather on lower end paper, as you would expect. Lower end paper not designed for fountain pen ink, but you do see that here. A mid dry time, so after 20 seconds, it was still pretty wet. And there's nothing too unexpected, and that is spelt wrong. There's nothing too unexpected. Like, it performs well. It does everything it should do. It's got good contrast on the page. It's a nice sort of professional sort of ink if you want something with a little bit of personality. The extras on this ink, some but low sheen. So like there's just hits of it, particularly in like swatches and things like that. And a little bit of blanket where you put down a lot of ink, but not a whole lot. There's some shading. So you can see if I look up nice and close here on some of that writing, you see a little bit of shading around some of that, which is nice. There's no shimmer, and it has low water resistance. So this is where I put water down and I dab it up, and it's taken up a lot of the ink. Still see a bit of the detail, but a lot of it is gone, and that's why I move it around with the water brush pen, and you can see once again it has really moved around. The lines of that triangle have just lost most of their definition. And if we look here at the chromatography, you actually see elements of that. So there's like a little bit held behind, of course, but we do move a lot of ink through. And actually we see these hints of pink at the top, which is where I think some of that sort of that purple element of the color sort of starts to creep in. If we look at the reverse of this Tolma River page, we see nothing has come through, even in the swatches. So it performs beautifully on this paper. Atramentis inks are beautiful on fountain pen friendly paper. So your Tolma River, your Clairefontaine and Rhodia, your Midori, your Gruffalo, Regalia paper, that kind of stuff. This just performs beautifully. Looking at it now on some lower end paper, we'll start with the student notepad paper. You see it's actually, the feathering's not too bad. Like I've certainly seen worse on this paper. And that's because it's not like a super gushy wet ink. None of these pens are super wet, but the Broad does put down a decent amount of ink. And if you look at the reverse of that page, there is a bit of bleed here, from it, but particularly in the finer nibs, it's actually performing pretty well. Now on the reflex copy paper, this is the standard 80 GSM copy paper. Once again, tiny bit of feathering, particularly where a bit more ink has gone down, of course. The color is a little bit more muted, and on the reverse, we get a similar sort of performance where the Broad bleeds through a little bit, but the extra fine is performing mostly okay, which, as you can see from some of the other inks on here, isn't always the case. So this performs pretty well. And then here on the Rhodia page, so the writing is all great. You can see that like we're putting down a nice amount of ink, we're getting a nice, sort of gradient of colors in the swatch there. It's looking nice. The water resistance here, where I put the water down and just let it dry, you can see just how much of the detail has gone missing. There's enough left behind that if you were really careful, you could probably make some of that out. But for the most part, the color just completely spreads, and we get a big hit of all of that pink that seeps out in the ink, in the chromatography and all of that. If we look at the reverse of this page, you see really only where the water has gone down is where anything comes through, nothing really in the swatch there, and in the writing, absolutely nothing. So it's performed really nicely, I think, on this paper. So let's now do a color comparison. And I've pulled up three inks. One is Waterman Serenity Blue, just to show that this is a little, like, it's not too far off. It's just probably a little bit earthier in the warmth of the tone, maybe. And if we look at Parker Quink Blue, you just see how rich and dark that color really actually is. Like, this is a much lighter royal blue. And then something I pulled up, which is what I consider to be quite a nice, like, blurple or blue purple ink, is Robert Oster Dragon's Night. And you really see it is quite blue, but if you look at it in comparison once again to something like Parker Quink there, you can just see just a little hint of that sort of purple undertone coming through in the De Atramentis, which is really very nice. So let's now talk the nitty-gritties. Price for the 45ml bottle, which I have here, 45 mils. Some of these are labeled 30, but they are 45. We have €13.20, £8.29, 14 US, and 29.95 Australian. As I said in the past, import and stuff like that does bump the price up here in Australia. So I think it's okay value. I think particularly if you can get at some of these European prices, you are getting a pretty decent deal. So I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. I said it's an excellent everyday ink option, as it's a good sort of stock blue. It performs well. It's got good color, good value, a really solid ink. One of the things I like about this ink is the fact that it works very nicely as an everyday ink. You're not, it's not a fancy ink with shimmer and sheen and all that kind of stuff. It just performs well. It cleans relatively easily. Nothing stains. It's a solid ink. It's a good option. So this was De Atramentis Thomas Jefferson, or Lapis, depending on the version you get. So if you can't find Thomas Jefferson, check out Lapis. Or if you can't find Lapis, check out Thomas Jefferson. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to stay up to date with the videos that I produce, and please feel free to get in touch. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there is a way you would like to support my channel, I would love to hear from you. A big thank you to De Atramentis for supporting my channel with this month of reviews of their ink. Their support is very much appreciated. In the meantime, enjoy your inks, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.